My name is Aisha and I identify myself as a trans woman, which means that I was assigned male at birth and I changed my gender from male to female, and I am 25 years old. I did my bachelor's in zoology from University of Delhi, Zakir Hussain College, and last year only I gave my master's entrance exam for AIMS Institute Delhi in human embryology. But even after securing All India rank 11th, I couldn't get through the admission process because there was no reservation for trans women. As such, there were reservations for SC, ST and EWS candidates, but there were no single reservation for trans people. So because of that, I was not able to secure my seat in the entrance exam, which I was hoping for.
Aisha today is a strong proponent of reservation for the members of the transgender community. Like Aisha, many trans people have lost out on opportunities because the centre has still not implemented the landmark NALSA verdict that directed the centre and state governments to take steps to treat transgender persons as socially and educationally backward classes of citizens and extend all kinds of reservation in cases of admission in educational institutions and for public appointments.
The demand for reservation has been a long-standing one. Ever since C.S. Dwaraknath proposed in the context of Karnataka that transgender persons be considered a backward community under the OBC category and given reservation. This matter has also been raised in the first iteration of a bill in support of transgender rights, raised by Tiruchi Siva as a private member's bill in the Rajya Sabha. And the government then passed a bill which did not have any provision for reservation, despite the NALSA versus Union of India Supreme Court judgment that enshrined in it the idea that there should be some form of reservation. But the government did not include this in their bill, which already by itself indicates a lack of interest in implementing reservations for transgender persons, because if they wanted to do so, or if they wanted to even approach or tackle the subject or lay down some guidelines, the bill would have been the appropriate place to do it. So in some sense, we already know their position by omission, but this is a direct statement from the government showing a lack of intent even in the future.
The Supreme Court in the NALSA case, NALSA versus Union of India, in fact gave a finding and gave an order that the transgender community has to be provided reservations both in public employment and in public education. And this was stated because the Supreme Court recognized that the transgender community is a vulnerable group. It is a marginalized community which has not been able to enter the mainstream. And the only way they can enter the mainstream is if reservation is provided both in education and employment. And the Supreme Court has categorically stated this. And this was stated in 2014. And, we are now in 2023. It's about 8 years. And we still haven't got reservations except in Karnataka.
It's unfortunate that we haven't been able to do this because the courts were very clear. The NALSA judgment talks about reservation for the transgender community, and there's a reason why this is needed. Here you have a community which is highly marginalized. The chances of them being, those who are visibly trans getting jobs are extremely low because for whatever reason there is, it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of bias against the community. So without reservation, it's going to be difficult. There are certain groups who are extremely marginalized. Why is it that we have reservation for Dalits? Why is it that we have reservation for OBCs? There's a reason. I think we need the reservation. Without reservation, it's going to be difficult for the community.
The transgender community in India, like in other parts of the world, have been fighting against discrimination. Many rights activists have petitioned the topmost court of the country to come to their rescue and protect their fundamental human rights, especially when the union government is looking the other way. Today, be it the issue of same-sex marriages, adoption rights, or employment rights, the community has been knocking on the doors of the judiciary to free them from the spiral of institutionalized apathy, exclusion, and marginalization.
The transgender community traditionally has been facing a lot of issues, right? Right from getting being able to rent accommodation, being able to stay on in school to get an education, because they are children who are trans are very visibly trans, and they're the ones who get sexually abused, they're the ones who get violated in many ways, so they drop out of school, so it's a big issue. So therefore, I think unless we make sure that we create the environment for them to be able to get an education, get a job and sustain that job, it's going to be very difficult for them.
I think it's very important to understand for any marginalized group that there's a lot of historical perspective to it. There's a lot of historical marginalization, and that dictates, that demands that we provide affirmative actions for those community members. And I think when we talk about reservation for trans community or non-binary community folks, we need to understand that for centuries, whether it was in the British time or whether it was in the post-independence time, there has been a lot of structural discrimination and criminalization in all aspects of life. And somewhere as a society, we owe it to the trans community to now try and make amends by which we can make them an equal citizen. And one way of doing that is providing reservation in education, employment, etc.
At the heart of the reservation debate are concepts of vertical reservation and horizontal reservation. While the Social Justice Ministry recently told Parliament that there was no proposal to introduce reservations for transgender persons, the trans community have been demanding horizontal reservations across castes.
Vertical reservation in some sense would refer to transgender persons being considered a caste, right? Whereas in fact, transgender persons experience discrimination on account of gender and whether they experience discrimination on account of caste actually depends very much on their caste background. And of course class background also. But therefore it would make more sense for say a Dalit trans person to avail of intersecting horizontal reservation, that is to say within each caste category that there be a proportional number of seats set aside within each caste category for trans persons of that category.
When it comes to reservation, how that reservation is also provided is also important for it to make really a difference. When the government talks about reservation, it's generally vertical reservation, which means as a trans person you get 1% reservation. But then trans people are not all coming from the general category. There are also trans people who are Dalits, there are trans people who are OBC. And just because I'm getting reservation under a category, I shouldn't lose it from the other categories. So when we speak about horizontal reservation, we are demanding that, for example, as a Dalit trans person, I should get that 1% reservation within the Dalit reservation category.
There has been a big debate within the trans community because we find that in some states, for example, like Tamil Nadu, the transgender community has been included within the other backward castes category, which is known in Tamil Nadu as the MBC or most backward caste community. Now that is what I would call vertical reservation, where reservation within SC, ST or OBC or other backward castes are provided. Now what happens with this is that though they have included transgender persons within the MBC category, they are still not availing any of the reserved seats because they have to compete with other members of the other backward castes. There is no separate reservation given for transgender persons. Now, in fact, because of this, despite this reservation provided, every year when different government jobs are announced, the trans persons are not getting even a single post in Tamil Nadu.
The government recently told the Parliament that only 10,635 trans people have registered on the national portal for transgender persons so far. India still lacks data related to the trans population. Dr. Aqsa Sheikh, one of India's first transgender doctors and a vocal advocate for gender justice for trans persons, says, if you're not counted, it means you don't matter. And if you don't matter, then it means there will be no policies or reforms made for you.
So for the last 12 years, we do not have an accurate count of trans persons. When it comes to the number of trans persons who have been vaccinated, people who got COVID, people who died of COVID, we do not have any data available. So I think it's important to be counted, because if you're not counted, then you don't matter, and if you don't matter, then there are no policies or reforms made for you.
The Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act of 2019 was enacted to protect rights and prohibit discrimination against members of the trans community. But these laws have not been implemented across states, and many rights activists feel that the laws are today only on paper, and the community continues to suffer discrimination, social ostracism, and abuse.
See, because you know that we are not the other backward classes, we are the most backward classes. That stands for MBC, and we needed this very much because हम लोगों को ये है कि हम लोग पहले से ही मतलब educationally we don't have any family support, and we have to do it by ourselves. And even after applying to many government job forms, as I saw, there is like 27 years, 28 years for a normal candidate. And when it comes to scheduled SC/ST candidate, they give relaxation of 5 years, 10 years, some this like that. So इस तरीके से ये है कि हम लोगों की एजुकेशन पहली बात है कंप्लीट टाइम पे हो ही नहीं पाती है. हम लोगों का मतलब ये है कि अपने आप सब कुछ करते हैं, तो टाइम पे जब आपकी ग्रेजुएशन ही नहीं हो पाएगी, आप ग्रेजुएशन लेट से कंप्लीट करो 25, 26 में, और फिर आप प्रिपरेशन भी करो गवर्नमेंट जॉब्स के लिए, तो आप उस चीज़ को मतलब उस एजुकेशन का फ़ायदा ही नहीं है. अगर हमारे पास रिलैक्सेशन ऑफ एज हो या फिर रेजर्वेशन हो किस चीज़ के लिए, तो मुझे लगता है रेजर्वेशन बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है ट्रांसजेंडर्स को अपलिफ्ट करने के लिए, सोसाइटी में मेन स्ट्रीम से जोड़ने के लिए. और ये सिर्फ पेपर वर्क्स में नहीं, इसको एक्चुअली प्रैक्टिकल लाइफ और ग्रास रूट लेवल पे भी इम्प्लीमेंट होना बहुत ज़रूरी है.